Okay. So first of all, very, very warm welcome to all of you. And I'm happy to be back teaching again, I must say. And today, I didn't plan it, but today is one of the 4 major festivals of the Tibetan Buddhist calendar. It's called in Tibetan Labab Duchen. And so it's supposed to be one of those special days when everything that's good is even better and everything that's bad is even worse. So we pay a lot of attention to our karma. Anyway, what it commemorates is from the Buddha's life. The Buddha's mother died 7 days after he was born. She had an unusual karma. She put him into the world. Then he was brought up by his wet nurse, who also became the one who founded the female Sangha. So she had a very important role to play as well. After she died, his mother went to one of the Deva realms, God realms. It's called Triatrimsa, or just heaven number 33. It's got a kind of a code name. And so then after his enlightenment, at one point, the Buddha spent 3 months. So I suppose as far as his disciples were concerned, they just saw him sitting in meditation, but his mind was with his mother. And it took him 3 months to teach his mother and bring her to full or to a very high degree of realization. And it's quite an interesting time because it's in the evening every day. He seems to have popped back to earth to teach Ananda the Abhidharma teachings. Now, today's talk is sort of quite loosely connected with Abhidharma. So it's a very auspicious, I suppose Tibetans would say. Although I can never hear the word auspicious without thinking suspicious. You know, what's somebody putting 2 and 2 together and making a big deal out of it. But anyway, today is a very special day. So I'm very happy to be teaching today. Let's start in the traditional way with our good motivation. So to do this, please, let's center ourselves, be still for a little while. And then zoom out. Here you are in a human body on planet Earth, however far you've got, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, or 80 years into it. We've had lots before. We'll have many incarnations afterwards. Today is, in a way, quite about what that means in Dharma. So just now, you're of course very busy. You probably have family, friends, perhaps work, a busy life. So we tried to leave all those aside for the time of the teaching. They'll all be there when we finish. And they'll take up lots and lots of your thought and your energy. But just now, we zoom out. You forever. You on your way to something wonderful, which is the truth of your own being. So we see ourselves on this Dharma path. And the heart of this Dharma path is compassion. In the White Lotus Sutra, the Buddha says, if you could take all my teachings and put them like one thing you could see right there in the palm of your hand, what would that one thing be? It would be compassion. They say the universe is in a grain of sand, but also that grain of sand is in the universe. We are one, and other sentient beings are beyond anything we can imagine or can count. Yet we can serve them beautifully by cultivating compassion, serenity, wisdom in our mind. So let's turn our hearts in loving care to all sentient beings and feel that we are here today to learn something that will enrich our tenderness, our sensitivity to our fellow beings and their situation, and help us through our opening to them to overcome this sickness, which is egotism, self-centeredness, the topic of today, what we're talking about. Overcome that sickness and gain the health of realizing that we are part of the fabric of everyone and everything. And we have such a wonderful role we can play in bringing into that endless fabric something good. Sonje chudon soje chonon la jancho padun dane chasunje. Dagi jinso jipe sanam ji trola penchera sonje drupara. Today's topic is immense and important, and as you know, it's the start of 3 talks. Now, these 3 talks are based on what we call the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma, the 3 phases of the Buddha's teachings. This is the way that most of the Mahayana schools of Northern Buddhism see the Buddha's teaching, and in particular the Tibetans. 3 phases. In the first phase, the Buddha introduces the absolute essentials, the basics, which are summed up as the 4 great truths, or the 4 truths of noble beings, realized beings. And once those basics were in place, and they are mainly about today's topic, no self, then he went on, for those who were ready, to talk about 2 things more, to deepen 2 topics. One is this absence of entity, or no self, into the absence of lasting entity in anything and anybody. And also into the meaning of great compassion, unconditional compassion, limitless compassion. So that's the Mahayana for those ready for Mahayana, not for everybody. And then in the last decade of his life, we see the Buddha as teaching the real truth, the heart nature of everything, which we call the Buddha nature teachings. So there's first turning, second turning, and third turning. So hello, I can see quite a few more people joining. So quick hello to you. And now, I think I can't really dialogue with you because I hope your microphones are all turned off. But I think you've all heard about this topic of no self, haven't you? You can maybe wave a hand, those of you who are on video, who's heard of it. Have you thought about it very much? Good. Because I think, if I was Taisitupa, I would say with all due respect, I think a lot of the Buddhists I've met are very familiar with the topic of there's no self, or I don't exist, and this kind of thing. But they don't really understand it, even basically. And this can lead to a lot of trouble and a lot of misunderstanding. So it's one of the reasons for these talks. So if you understand it as meaning I don't exist, anybody understand it like that? You can wave a hand. Anyway, screens. Then you probably got it wrong. It means I don't exist absolutely, but I do very much exist relatively, and nearly all the Buddha's teachings, 45 years of teachings, and that fill 100 volumes. Nearly all of them are about how we exist. So we really need to understand it. For instance, the Buddha himself, when he was talking to his two main disciples, Shariputra and Mahamoggallana, he told them, and we find this in the Jataka stories, about past lives. Now, those two had been very close friends, helping each other. In 31 past lives, the Buddha told. And in 30 of those lives, when the Buddha tells the story of what happens, he says, and at that time I was so-and-so in the story, and you were. 30 past lives, the Buddha is saying, I was this person, I was that person. For Mahakasyapa, the first patriarch, the one who took care of the Sangha when the Buddha passed, then we find, I think it's 19 different former lives the Buddha tells, and very often in those past lives, he was the father of the Buddha. And the Buddha, telling his own story, tells a story, a very long, slow story of progressive evolution over 3 cosmic eons. Now, if we come away from history and the stories to you and me, because there is one very, very great teaching that when I was young, one of the main figures in the Buddhist world was a Zen teacher called Suzuki Roshi. And he said, when we are studying Dharma, we're not studying something, we're studying ourselves. So the Buddha's teaching is not an academic topic. It's not just rambling philosophy. The whole point is so that we consider our own situation and understand it better. So as far as these Buddhist teachings on no self are concerned, it means we've been around a very, very long time. This incarnation in this body where we operate through 5 senses, and all of our this life experience has been limited to those 5 senses mainly. It's just one. And in it, you feel like you. Do any of you feel like Ken Holmes? I don't think so. And I don't really feel like any of you. You feel like you, don't you? I hope so. Now, this being located either in one body, or if we look a long, long way down the line, in perhaps multiple bodies, but still there will be this feeling of me here, a center point of awareness that witnesses the world from that center point. This is going to go on until you're Buddha. This is the Buddha's teaching. Not that you don't exist, but you're a very long story and you've got a long, long future in front of you. And so the Buddha, not just talking about the past lives of his disciples, but in the Mahayana Sutras, often gives predictions of when such and such a disciple will become a Buddha and how it will happen and so on. So then what are these teachings on anatma, no self, saying? It's not that we don't exist, it's that we don't exist lastingly. We don't exist eternally as something tangible and fixed. We do exist in a way which is impermanent and interdependent, and what we are is an ever-changing story. But that story will be your story until you're Buddha. It won't be anybody else's. And the karma that you make will come back to you and go to nobody else. So it's very important that we understand we exist interdependently, dependent on our own past, which we call our karma, And we exist impermanently because it is a constant change. The more we look at it, it's not just lifetime to lifetime or decade to decade, because you're obviously not the same person you were when you were 5 years old. But even from moment to moment, day to day, second to second. So how that works through karma, causes and effects, is what fills most of the Buddha's teachings. It's very important we understand it. So then, why is anatma, the absence of an atman, a lasting entity, a lasting soul, why is it so important? Well, for two reasons. One, at the time of Buddha, we go back to, see, Buddha's time was an amazing time on earth. And it's hard not to get lost in history, because the thinking that has animated the earth, be it in Europe with the Greeks, or in India with the Buddha and the other great Jain and other masters, yoga masters and so on, or whether it be further east in China, then a lot of the world's major thinking, which has kind of kept it going philosophically until now, started then. It was a time of great input and a time of civilization, if we think of civilization being about our human ability to treasure our role in this world, to learn about non-violence, care for each other, and so on. So at that time in India, there were philosophies, there were schools of thought, schools of meditation and yoga, who had the idea that we have a lasting personal soul, a lasting personal soul that they called Atman. And so the Buddha's position is, no, we don't. Sorry, and that's not just an idea. You know, it's like one of these things, I'll give you £1 million if anyone can produce it. It's like Uri Geller's spoon inside the vacuum case. If anyone can bend it, then they get $1 million. So Buddha said, what is it you are talking about, other than your idea of a lasting soul? Where is it? What is it? Can anyone find it or show it? Does it have any reality of its own, rather than just as a thought in philosophers' minds? So that's the Buddha's stance, that nobody ever found it, and that the reality of who we are is a changing story. And on top of that, it's not a changing story that's always going up and up and up. It's a changing story that can go up and can go down. And can go up and down quite interestingly as well, because when we look at the Buddha's past lives, or even I got one text at one point written by a former Trungpa Rinpoche about the former Akon Rinpoche, about his 100 previous lives. So you'd expect 100 previous human lives as some kind of Lama or saint. Quite a lot of them are animals. So although one can be reborn as an animal, like the Buddha was in the Jataka stories, it can be as quite a wise and enlightened animal, not necessarily a lower birth, but an animal body in which other animals can be taught or helped or whatever. So the picture of reality that the Buddha paints is quite a complicated one. We can go up, we can go down, we can manifest in all sorts of forms. And when we're in those forms, then we have what are called the faculties. Buddha gives us 22 major faculties, like the ability to see and hear and smell and taste. So we get a different kind of kit. If we think of our human life, when you are born into this kit, gradually you develop in the womb your nerve endings and then sight and smell. And then you pop out and you're born. And then gradually you learn, you develop experiences based on what this particular body can do for you. We can't see infrared, we can't see ultraviolet. And there are many things we can't see that are there. We pick up something, and gradually our life takes its own story, its own shape. And then we die and we leave it. We can be born in quite a different kit. So that's the main point. When the Buddha says we don't exist, or one of the main points is that we don't exist lastingly. It's a philosophical stance that the Buddha set up for his followers. And in meditation, we explore it, not with the preconceived idea that must be true because Buddha said so. But the Buddha actually invites us to discover for ourselves. And when we do Mahamudra meditation or many of the deeper meditations, then we spend a lot of time on the cushion. And every time we feel like you, and I feel like me, that feeling, that so strongly ingrained feeling, we explore it. What was that? What just happened when I felt like me? Where was it? Was it in my heart center? Was it in my head center? Did it feel like it filled everything? Did it have a color? Did it have a feeling? So the Buddha's philosophical stance is there is no lasting me, no personal soul, no Atman that can be found. Philosophical stance. Now, the other reason the Buddha taught it is because of its use. Because once there is this feeling of me, and because we're born into a human body in our cases, then we have these eyes. So we're on the brain side of the eyes. We're the seer. And then through the power of interdependence, what comes into our eyes and what is reformulated and interpreted by our brain seems like other. So once there's a feeling of me in here who sees, me in here who hears sounds coming from other, there is self, there is other. And once there is self and other, some of the other looks so nice and we want it. And sometimes we want it so much it hurts. And sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't get it. Sometimes we kind of get it, but it's not what we expected. So there is all this desire. And then for what we have, there can be clinging. And then sometimes what these eyes see or what these nerve endings feel, and then not just the five senses, as the five senses build up a reality as we grow up, our thoughts and ideas and opinions based on what's happened. Sometimes what we see and hear, smell, taste, touch, is unpleasant. We don't like it. And sometimes it makes us very upset. There's rejection, there's hostility. Because of this basic sense of me in here, the observer, the experiencer. And then sometimes, a lot of the time, all of the time, there's ignorance. Because either we don't know the real ignorance, and of course we don't know what we don't know because we don't know it. And there's a lot of it. Or we know things, but we don't know them well enough. We know them wrongly, we misinterpret, we project. So what are called the three mind poisons of selfish desire and hostility and mental dullness and ignorance and confusion. These cause our suffering. And the basic message of the Buddha is how to get rid of suffering by the root forever. So it's very important that we understand that actually our suffering comes from our karma, our harmful karma. Our harmful karma came through our desire, anger, jealousy, pride, related to each other. And that came from this sense of I. Now, this false sense of I. When we come to the third talk and the last turning of the wheel of Dharma, we will see that there is the real I, the real identity, let's call it that, what we really are, Buddha nature. But just now, in this first talk, and for the basic teachings of the Buddha, then the message is suffering hurts. We make ourselves hurt. We make each other hurt. And that is terrible, and it doesn't need to be. So how to understand the mechanisms of suffering and how to uproot them once and for all is the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, embodied in the two truths, embodied in the four truths, the four great truths. I don't call them the four noble truths, because in the actual language, it's not the truths that are noble. They are called the truths of noble beings, those who've got out of suffering. They're called Aryas, who attained the stages of the path. It's what is true for them. Not quite true for us at the moment. We're working on it. So the truth of noble beings. So now, where to go from here? It's almost time for my little bird to sing. It's coming up to 11 o'clock and we're halfway through the talk. So I hope so far so good. What I want to do is not to plunge into the first turning of the wheel of Dharma as it was presented and into the four great truths. You'll find those in so many publications, in so many YouTubes. There's a wealth of information about them. What I want to do is to approach this first turning of the wheel of Dharma in the Mahayana way, whereby we think in terms of what is called the two truths. If you look back at a Dharma center like Samyelin and the various things that were taught, especially in the first, let's say, 30 years, because Akron Rinpoche invited the greatest Tibetan teachers from various traditions to come and do what they were best at. The great meditators to teach meditation, to give empowerments, the great scholars to teach their speciality. If you look at all of the list of courses, you might expect, if you're Buddhist, to find a course on the Four Noble Truths somewhere, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, but you won't. You might find it. At one point, we did Mipam Rinpoche's Entering the Gateways of Wisdom, Kenjuk. And in there's a very, very extensive elaboration of the Four Truths. Gyaltsab Rinpoche taught that in 1984 in Samyelin. I interpreted for him. But otherwise, so what is it? Was Samyelin... Oh, there's the bird. It's quite quiet today. Can you hear it? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, is Samyelin, has it been a renegade center that denies the basic principles of Buddha Dharma and doesn't even teach the Four Noble Truths? No. It's because in the Mahayana approach, these two truths, relative and absolute, are vital. They're the key to everything. And if I may be presumptuous and with all due respect, say from what I've seen, because I spent most of my life traveling around Dharma centers, talking with people, thousands of people, where people get Buddhism wrong is that they don't get these two truths, or they don't get them properly in balance. What is relatively true? It's true, but only relatively so, but it's true. And what is absolutely true? Relative truth, absolute truth. So now if we go to the first turning of the wheel of Dharma and see it through those eyes, and Buddha's teaching about no self, then relatively, the truth of the matter is that we have a changing, interdependent self, which is known as a stream of consciousness. It has a very memorable Sanskrit name. If you go back as long as I do to a rock group whose name was Santana. Anybody remember Santana? Yes. Well, it's called Santana. It means a stream of consciousness. That's you. It's what me. It's what each one of us is. We're like currents in a river, but that current is individual. It never gets mixed up with another one. You won't wake up me tomorrow. I won't wake up you. I won't get your karma. You won't get my karma. And my story all the way up to freedom from suffering, first bodhisattva level, all the way through the 10 bodhisattva levels will still be a story, Ken's story. When I become like Maitreya and Manjushri and whatever they'll call me then, Kenjushri or Kentreya or whatever it will be, it will still be my story until at the end of the final bodhisattva level, like a drop of water going into the ocean, there'll be nothing left of this story. Nothing. Not even the tiniest trace. So relatively, we are this very long-term story, and what we do inside that story, even though it's like a dream, even though it's like hypnosis, it's like a conjuration, it's like a magic show. Nevertheless, what we do is vitally important. We must never underestimate the importance of this relative, ever-changing existence that we are. So the Buddha teaches what we are. And he teaches it, if we go to those, now this is the difficult bit. Remember I said at the beginning that Buddha came down every evening for 3 months to teach his main disciples Abhidharma. So if you take those 3 months of teachings and put them into 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes that I've got, this is what I'm trying to do. It's impossible. But what Buddha does is to give us the tools, to give us the language to discover what we really are. Not an idea of what we are, what we really are. And while we're on that topic, something also that we need to know is in those teachings on karma, Buddha shows the importance of what we do as opposed to the importance of the story we tell ourselves about what we're doing. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this in yourself or in life. You might just have noticed it in politics, wink, wink, nod, nod, and especially at the moment, but I'm not interested in politics. But there's a big difference between what people are doing. Sometimes they say, we the government are doing this for your own good. Well, I think there are many opinions about that. And sometimes we can tell ourselves all sorts of stories about who we are and what we're doing and why we're doing it. But whatever the story is, or the cover story, There is what you are actually doing, what you're saying, the impact of your physical existence on other physical existences, on the environment, and so on and so on. The doing is organic. Whatever you intended, your words, the speech doing, has an effect on other people. Whether you wanted that effect, whether you told yourself, whatever motivation you had, the sounds come out and the world is affected. You have this world affecting mouth. And as we open it and sounds come out, it's just the same as this body that picks plants or that causes the deaths of animals and so on. There is the actual doing. And what Buddha teaches us is that karma, the word karma, means the actual doing. That is what is the shaper of futures. And what we're experiencing now is the result of what we did in the past, whatever the cover story, however accurate or inaccurate the story we told ourselves. So that's a very important point I wanted to make today in relation to karma. And it's a very, like all of Dharma is about you, it's about me. And that we try to understand this difference between our impact on ourselves as well as on all other beings in the environment. The difference between the actual impact and the story, the narrative that we are making about that. So anyway, in terms of who we actually are, rather than a narrative, rather than a philosophy, rather than an idea, a story of who we are, what the Buddha teaches in Abhidharma is how we can sit, still our mind, and become mindful to observe who we really are in deed and thought, moment after moment. And we come to recognize and label those moments. It's helpful to label them. So sometimes we have a sensorial moment. What was that advert from my youth? Bisto for a gravy. It was a gravy advert. Probably most of you never, too young maybe. But anyway, sometimes our nose smells, our hands touch, our eyes see. We listen to music. So the five senses. Just now, I was distracted for a 10th of a second by the chainsaw noise outside the window. My mind went there. My mind for a 10th of a second was chainsaw mind, chainsaw sound mind. Sometimes we are sensorial. You sit and meditate, your knees ache. We have a knees aching sensorial moment. Then sometimes we have feelings, like if I hear the chainsaw, it's an unpleasant feeling. It feels all wrong. And I love the squirrels and their environment. Their habitat here is disappearing. So for many reasons, I can't hear a chainsaw and think of it as music. It's not like listening to Ravel. It's an unpleasant feeling. Sometimes there is a feeling, discomfort, ease, comfort. It's organic, it's biological. Feelings. Then sometimes, and often triggered by the feelings and the sensorial thing, we have various thoughts. Some of the thoughts just name. So, and they are sort of, in horse races, when you get a commentator, if it's on TV, even though you can see what's happening on TV, you've got somebody telling you that this one's coming up on the outside and this one's falling back. In our mind, we have a commentator that's kind of telling us, describing, in very gross terms, actually, in very rough terms, with rough labels, what's happening. And then sometimes that leads to other mental activity, because it triggers memory, for instance. We see something, we hear something, and then all of a sudden, out of our mind comes a memory, and in those moments we're in memory. So what the Buddha teaches is how to recognize these different moments. And then because there are so many similar but different moments, so like if you have a pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, or no feeling at all, or this kind of thought or that kind of memory, they happen a lot. If you watch your mind well with mindfulness and awareness, even for 1 minute, then there'll be feelings, there'll be thoughts, there'll be memories, there'll be sensorial experience. So because, for instance, how many feelings, just very simple feelings, nice, oh, not nice, or nothing special, not nice, not nice. How many of those do you have in a day? 3? 30? 300? Maybe 3,000? Maybe we're getting there. Because there are so many split second or 1 second or 5 second feelings in a day, then if we went to the end of the day and if somehow you collected them, like this feeling and that feeling, and you put them all into a pile, there will be a big heap. So they're called the heaps. The heaps. How many sensorial experiences, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, which generally we call form. Form is the forms, sound forms, sight forms, odor forms that we experience. How many of those in a day? 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000? So we get, after one day, a heap of those. And then memories, and then, so these heaps, the Buddha talks about 5 of them. 5 heaps. Form, so this is mainly sensorial experiences that present themselves to the mind, either real ones through the 5 senses or reproduced ones through memory. Reproduced ones through memory is form. And then number 2, the feelings that they produce. And then number 3, cognition, our power to cognize. Recognize, this means to name, so that when you see things, they are familiar. You know, it can be quite disturbing when we see things that aren't familiar. What the hell is that? Is it an animal? Is it we need to recognize. So cognizing means recognizing. It's happening all the time, hundreds, thousands of times a day, a moment of recognizing. The 4th heap, or aggregate, or skandha, is the Sanskrit word, is various mental activities. There are 51 main ones. This is all the mechanisms of mind which pull the mind out of one reality and put it into the next one, into a form, into a feeling, into a cognition, and most importantly, in this number 4, into virtue or non-virtue, whereby what we're experiencing and feeling about, we turn those feelings and those cognitions, we can turn them into something useful for us, liberating, or into something which is binding for us and taking us deeper into suffering. So virtue and non-virtuous mental activities are a big part of this 4th pile of things. Virtuous thoughts, virtuous motivations, non-virtuous ones. So that's number 4. And number 5 is consciousness. The seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, the actual process of consciousness going here, going there. So in those 3 months of giving the Abhidharma teachings, the Buddha is really fleshing out the details of those 5. And if you ever get into Theravada literature, you'll see many books, incredibly complicated works, developing the details of the Abhidharma. It became very big in Dharma around the turn of the millennium, the year zero, sort of the centuries before and afterwards. Buddhism became very scholastic, when the universities appeared and the study appeared of those things. But the point is this: that's really what's going on. A feeling's really happening. It's not an idea. You feel. Your seeing actually happens. You see. That's happening. Just now you're looking at a screen. You're hearing sounds. And then you have a virtuous thought or a non-virtuous thought. That's really happening. So the meditator sits and observes and comes to understand who I really am on this relative level. And by this reductionist process, you see that now I'm a thought, now I'm a feeling, now I'm a memory, now I'm feeling again, now I'm this again. One starts to see the reality of who one is, and then based on that observation, in the kind of intelligence part of the meditation process, we are looking, was there something constant in there all the time that I can call me? The Ken part. And if there is, great, you just won the prize. But if in all of that you didn't find a me, well, maybe you're getting closer to the truth of who we are. Now, when we explore this, when we have time, and I mean time, weeks, months, the normal way we go through the two truths is to look back at all of the Indian traditions of Buddhism and to put them into 4 categories. The reductionist way of seeing I am not a fixed Ken, but I am these 5 aggregates. And then those 5 is not even 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 4 has got 51 main parts. So we start to getting into I am hundreds of different activities. And then we look at something like a hand, which for us is a hand. But then a hand is a palm and 4 fingers and a thumb. And then a finger is 3 phalanges. And we go down and down and down till we come to atoms. They talked about atoms at the time of Buddha. To see that it's just so complicated. And then we get into what is called the Buddhist philosophy of neither one nor many. We can't say this is a hand, because the hand is just the name we give to thumbs and a palm, bits and pieces together. The reality of the hand is the bits and pieces, and each bits and pieces is made of more bits and pieces. So the idea of a one, it's like if you took all of the pieces that make a car, but not assembled, and you put them on the ground. A car is no more than those, all put together. So this reductionist way of realizing what we really are, so we can't say I am Ken, full stop. Ken is thoughts, feelings, this body, the form. The body itself is hands, arms, legs. They're all made of bits and pieces down to the atoms. You can't find the one. And even when you go down to the atom, you can't find it to say, that's what we really are. And then these are the building blocks we can work upwards. You can't find even the one. Our scientists, they've not found atoms. They've got ideas. Nobody found them. Nobody found it. We observe effects. That's all. So if you can't find the one basic building block, then you can't develop an idea of many. Many what? You can't find it. So this philosophy goes on always mind-boggling. We won't go there. Just to tell you what goes on in case you come across it, or when you come across it, to understand that we get rid of the idea of a fixed me by observing what is really there. And then once we're familiar with who we really are in terms of the five aggregates, then we can see some of those aggregates and the way they come together. That's the troublemaking. When the eyes see this, and the mind associates that with certain ideas that have developed. And then when those ideas make you lust and desire, or when those ideas make you angry and want to hurt, in all of those processes, we can start to weed out the helpful ones and the harmful ones and arrange our karma. So that's the Abhidharma sort of way of saying relatively, that's what we are. There is no fixed self, but at the same time that, need to go back and be systematic. I said we look at 4 boxes, right? We put all of Dharma into 4 boxes. So the first box is reductionist. The second box, to put it very, very briefly, and this is very rough, says, if you've got the parts of a body or the parts of a chariot they used in the old days, these days we might say a car. Although an actual car is only those things put together, there's no extra thing that's a car that suddenly appears. Nevertheless, there's a functionality. Because if you put all the bits and pieces on the ground, you can't drive to Dundee. But when they're all put together, you can drive. There's a functionality. So the second main kind of Dharma, if it is too rough, looks more at the functionality of the bits and pieces together, but still comes to the same conclusion. There is no fixed self. So although there is no fixed self that anyone can find, through observation, through the Buddha's teaching about this is a harmful process, this is a helpful process, as we manipulate all the bits and pieces that we are, as we learn right conduct, as we learn meditation, as we learn the Buddha's wisdom teaching, we can learn to change the patterns in this ever-changing stream of consciousness, samtana, that we are. At the same time, we can see again and again what's at the heart of the problem of suffering is a fixed idea of me, which is, when we come to it, a delusion. Me, my entitlement, me. So ultimately, we find there is no lasting self. And on the cushion, when we explore the relative me here, we can find nothing fixed. But at the same time, we realize, I hope, that we are this story. Now, you never get a break. I often joked in my live sessions in Dharma centers, because going back, I go back to the time when the Tibetans were poor refugees in India. And I actually left Dharamsala in 1970 with the idea of coming to the West, setting up a few rock concerts, raising money for the Tibetans in Dharamsala and the Dalai Lama, and going back. I was linked to one of the Dalai Lama's monasteries at the time. I got back to the West and the rock concerts never worked, and they ended up in Samiling, so my story changed. But I often thought, if you could get a break from your own samtana, your own stream of consciousness, then somebody like the Dalai Lama could make a fortune renting out his mind for 5 minutes. Imagine, for £50,000, you can be the Dalai Lama for 5 minutes. He'll take your mind, and he'll be you for 5 minutes, and you'll feel what it's like to be Dalai Lama for 5 minutes. Well, nice fantasy, but it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. You'll be you. You'll be you. This changing you until you die, and after death, through the experiences. And as you start again in your next life, and again, and again, and again. So the Buddha's first turning is to make us aware of this. And this suffering of birth, which is not the suffering of childbirth, it's the fact of starting all over again as a human, as a butterfly, whatever it may be. So the message to take away from this is that right now we are human. We are this stream of consciousness in perhaps the best opportunity in this vast cosmos that possibly exists. Humans are rare. We only have to look at all the wriggly worms and the flying things and the creeping things and all the sentient life that we can observe just as humans to know that being human is rare. Being a human of conscience, who cares, who has a potential of love in their heart, who has a potential of moral awareness, discipline, who values their life as something spiritual, is really quite rare. And then amongst those who have that inclination, those who actually, I suppose, practice is the word, which means vigorously, from the heart, channel as much of their life as they can into shaping future lives. That's incredibly, incredibly rare. So in ourselves, we have the inclination, we are Dharma people, and somehow, miraculously, from the outside, we have friends, we have the Dharma, we have the Sangha, we have very, very wise beings who've manifested in our world, in our own lives, to help us along the way. There's no greater kindness than this. And although sometimes we can look at the news and look at the world and feel a great sense of misfortune, let's not let it distract us from our own good fortune. What we can give to the world just now is amazing, through our own ability to still our mind, to feel love for each other, to feel care for the world, and to be part of this interdependent fabric of everything. To be a part that is a good part, a light, something radiating to all other sentient beings. This feeling of a path to peace, to be at peace with ourselves, to be at peace with everyone and everything we meet. Relatively, we have this stream of existence. Ultimately, there's nothing in there that you can put your finger on and say, that's me. But when you zoom out and look at the story, changing all the time, it very definitely is you. So we need, and my own teacher, Akon Rinpoche, used this word so much. We need to accept ourselves as we are, and to use that as raw material to become what we really want to be. It's called a precious human existence. So I'm looking at my big clock, and the small hand is where it is, and the big hand is on past. So I think this talk is officially over. And if you've got any points you'd like to make, or any questions you'd like to ask, then we'll carry on for another 15 minutes. But just now, let's dedicate anything that was good in this talk, something useful, something that helped you understand yourself a bit better, feel more loving care for each other. Then let's dedicate that to everyone. Sonam liye tomche zikvani tobne nipe dranam pamche jegana chi palab trukpaye sipe sole drowa drolvare. Okay, so you can unmute your microphones. Now, I think I've got two screens full of people, so I might not be able to see you. Maybe speak up if you'd like to say something rather than put up a hand. Anybody?
Ken, I had a question.
Yes, hi Vicky.
Hi. You talked about the exploration of self, and you mentioned the first two, which is to look at it in a reductionist way and then in a functional way.
Mm.
For the others?
That's next week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just about function. That second way, it's let's do it 10 seconds of history. The Buddha's teachings were spread out through his various sutras and discourses that the Sangha learned by heart. They didn't really write them down for a few centuries. So what the Sangha did in the summer retreats, the 3 months rains retreat, would be to repeat the Buddha's sutras by heart. Mm. But as writing became more and more common in India, and as these teachings were written down, then people started analyzing them. And then not just taking what the Buddha said here and what he said, they were putting it together, all the stuff on karma, all of the stuff on whatever it may be, meditation, and then analyzing it. So this is when the Abhidharma teachings came to the fore. And the commentaries kind of took precedence in a way when it came to learning Dharma over just learning the Buddha's discourses, because they were such beautiful summaries. Rather than referring to 20 different discourses, you've got the whole thing summed up by somebody who's already done that and done the analysis. So that gave rise to what we call the Vaibhashika, which is group number 1 of the 4. The Vaibhashika followed the Vaibhasha, which means the great commentary, which was the most famous analysis of all the Buddha's teachings at the time. Mm-hmm. And they were mainly reductionists, I think we use a simple word. Then there came a counter movement to this, because people started seeing, yeah, okay, we follow the Vaibhashika, but in the end, this was written by somebody who understood it in that somebody's own point of view and could only give us that somebody's view of all the Buddha's teaching. Let's go back to the original and let's leave a more broad space for it. So they went back to the sutras. So they're called the Sautrantikas, the ones who go to the sutras. And whereas the Vaibhashikas tend to have it all sorted, I think, this is that, this is consciousness, this is feeling, this is that. All of this makes the illusion of ego. You sort this, there you're in our hat, you're enlightened, done, sorted. The whole thing is scientifically analyzed. I think the feeling you get out of the Sautrantikas who go back to the Buddha's sutras is a relativist position, because they say, yeah, okay, well, that's the way it seems to us. But we're only human with these eyes and these ears and this ability to think. So as humans sharing information with each other, we can say that's it. But in fact, what's really out there, man, goodness knows. It's kind of, there's a mystery out there that we humans are experiencing in a very human way and comparing our thoughts, but maybe it's not so sorted as it seems. So that question mark about ultimate reality and what it is quite a useful step forward. And especially those first two of the four boxes, they deal with mind and matter as separate things. We are consciousness, we are awareness experiencing a material universe. An atomic universe is basically their position. Then next week, when we come to mind only and middle way, which are the Mahayana schools, then the mind only says mind and matter, and no, forget it, it's just all mind. So that's a big step. And our 20th century, 21st century science has gone down that road too. Still working on it from the scientists I speak with. But anyway, it's all mind, because matter is just a mental experience. Then at the end is the middle way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes. Who am I? I'm trying to see who's asking. Who's that?
Yeah.
Oh, hello. Yeah.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Oh, grand, thank you. How are you?
Oh, good. Yeah.
I was just wondering, so if you understand no self, do you not still suffer because you have the feelings, and you still have the body, you still have the feelings? So if you understand no self, would you not still suffer?
Yeah.
Because you're pain.
It depends, because this is part of a package. Mainly what we're doing through understanding no self is no longer creating the causes of future suffering. That's the main thing. So no longer creating causes of future suffering. That's enormous. But then at the same time, because we are learning to meditate, if it's in that context of that first turning of the wheel of Dharma, then the whole way we relate to our suffering is a way which makes us suffer a bit less. Even if it's physical suffering, I think something very, very interesting that happens in some Burmese monasteries is that people from the West go there who have chronic pain, and they learn very strict shamatha, because the mind can only be with one thing at a time, our relative mind. So it can't be aware of the pain sensations. If it's one point, it'd be with something else. You know, it's a bit like the principle of a TENS machine. I don't know if you know TENS machines for pain relief, where they send a little electrical impulse to distract the mind for a second. So in that same way, you can meditate and even physically not hurt so much. Or one can understand that that's samsara, but have a mind which can rest in peace through concentration. So understanding the illusion of ego and that what we really are these five aggregates won't take away suffering immediately. But it will certainly help us not to make more suffering for ourselves in the future. I think that's the key point.
Thanks, Ray.
Hello, Ken. Could I ask a question?
Yeah, just a second. I think you might be on the other screen. Yes, hi. Hi, Ellie.
Hi. Just a question. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. Just about intention and action on karma. For example, if you have a good intention, I don't know, maybe you see an ant who is drowning and you try to rescue it, but your action is you actually squash it. I was just wondering what impact that would have on your karma. If your intention is good, but actually your action is negative.
There are, when we look at karma, then we split it into physical karma, what your body does, speech karma, what you say, and how you interact with other people, even if it's not directly through words. You know, body language, eye language, it's communication. And then your mind karma. So in terms of physical karma, like killing, if your intention was good, as far as I understand it, then you won't be making any killing karma, even though through your action a being died. But it means that maybe your mind karma still has ignorance, if we use that ugly word to describe it, because we're not skillful enough. We don't know quite what to do, whether to interfere or not, how to interfere, if we do interfere in other beings' existences. And this was very much part of the training of the early Sangha about walking on grass and protecting insects. And when we see the accomplishment that the different Sangha had, some of them, their mind is so still that they sense the beings that are, that they're approaching. And even if they can't see them with their eyes, they will know not to put a foot down there because they feel the life which is there, because their awareness mind, their meditation is good enough to help them. So in terms of mind karma, then if it does happen, for instance, that with a good intention we do cause damage like that, it's very important to try and learn from it so that next time round we can act more wisely. Hi, Ulrika. I have Nick. Anybody else? Because if not, then we'll wind down. Yes, Lorna. No. Are you trying to put your microphone on, Lorna? No, no, you're just fiddling with the screen. Okay.
Ken, it's Paul here.
Hi, Paul.
Ken, I just want to say thank you. Perfect timing teaching, karma acting wonderfully. So I just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to see where you are. Can't see you. Anyway, thanks, Paul. It's very kind of you. Yes.
Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
Hello, Ken. Hi. Just a quick one. As you may have gathered, I'm rather an avid gardener.
Yeah.
I'm doing some external work. Now, yesterday, as I was topping some trees and getting the ivy off, etc., there was hundreds and hundreds of insects. Oh God, not earwigs. I forget the name of them now. Anyway, there was hundreds of these beings just pouring out the tops of these trees. And I felt so guilty that I was literally really destroying their home. I tried to save some, rotted pieces of wood where some of these beings may dwell or, go to dwell again. But I'm just wondering, how can I kind of not gain negative karma for displacing or maybe killing even these beings? And I felt so
It's
awful.
an excellent question, and I wish I had an excellent answer.
Okay.
But I don't, because I think seeing as today was a lot about going back to the early Sangha and the time of the Buddha, it's one of the reasons that people took vows and took robes. And in the vows, you see that you just don't even touch or handle instruments that cause harm to other beings. When the Buddha was teaching the monks, he said, don't even out of kind of nervousness, scratch the ground while you're listening to the teachings or fiddle with things, because fiddling with things can cause damage. So they just abstain from such activity, which if one can is best, because it certainly does cause harm to others, and we don't want to cause harm to others. But I don't have an excellent answer, because these days, I think one of the most difficult things in the Samaling monastery we ever had was mice and rats. because as a organization open to the public, we weren't allowed to have them. You know, there were inspectors who came, but the way not to have them is to kill them. I mean, there's not much else you can do. And we tried, you know, talking to them. We couldn't find somebody who played a flute and could lead them all down the road to somewhere else. You know, none of that worked. So then it was either Samiling shuts or Samiling puts out a contract with a company called Rent-A-Kill, and they come. I mean, we didn't do it ourselves, but that's kind of neither here nor there. Because of us, they came. And so those situations are hellish. How can you balance off a possible benefit of doing some things and the harm it causes? It's why yogis, they go to a cave and they take a promise not to go more than 7 steps away from the cave entrance, so that they don't take any risk of damaging life. So we try our very best to cause the least harm possible. And if what we're doing does cause harm, then on the bodhisattva path, it's not like we've got a license to cause harm, but at least we think through this connection I've made with these beings, in the future, when I have power, when I have serenity and something to share, may they be drawn towards me as someone I can help. So that, and there's an incredible story, actually comes from the making of the great stupa in Voidness. And no, sorry, it comes from when Dharma first went to Tibet. And there was the king who brought Dharma to Tibet magnificently, King Trisondetsen. And he had a daughter. And his daughter, who was marveling at Guru Rinpoche, who was there, Padmasambhava, and all the great scholars. And she said, I'm so fortunate to be born in this time. She could feel the magnificence of it all happening. She said, I must in the past have done something really good to be born, not just in this time, but to be born as the daughter of the king who's sponsoring the whole thing and someone who can talk with Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava. And her dad, King Trisondetsen, he was a bodhisattva. He had clairvoyant power, and he kind of smiled. So she said, what is it, Dad? And he said, you really want to know? And she said, yeah. So he said, well, then he went back to the story of making the great stupa in Voidness. And he said, at that time, when this was happening, I was one of the people making the stupa. And at one point, a mosquito landed on my neck. And before I could think and do the right Buddhist thing, I splattered it, and I immediately made a prayer. You were the mosquito. So, you know, these stories, whether they're, I mean, we must take them as true because they're in the books, but they certainly tell us something, that there is a power we can make if we have a harm connection with others, even if our intention was good, but somehow it goes wrong. There is a connection, and that connection is a wonderful thing. And I remember the 16th Karmapa, he would say sometimes when people, they sent him threatening letters, hate letters, or they were inimical to him. He said, this is wonderful because at least they're connected. In the future, I can do something to help them.
Yeah.
And the worst is when there's no connection, because then there's no karma to bring us back together again into a very auspicious relationship. Very striking. Thank you. So, like I said, I don't have an excellent answer, but if you found you have done, first of all, try to do as least damage as possible. And if there is some damage, please do prayers. Please do prayers. Okay, I think that's it. I should, what do they say? I should let you go. So go well, and maybe see many of you next week. And thank you for being here. Thank you for practicing Dharma. So bye-bye, everybody. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.
And
Bye bye, Stacey. Bye bye.